Welcome back. You're still watching The Agenda. So the City of Joburg has decided to appeal the court judgment that Floyd Brink's appointment as Joburg's city manager was unlawful. On Tuesday, the Gauteng division of the High Court in Johannesburg found that Brink's appointment was unconstitutional, unlawful and invalid. So will the city ever experience leadership stability? Well, to answer that question, of course, we are joined by our guest in studio. Good morning to you and thank you so much for joining us. Please do introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Mlimandlela and Ndamase from the city.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. I mean, your initial thoughts when you saw that judgment coming out of the Gauteng High Court, essentially saying that the appointment of Floyd Brink as city manager is unconstitutional and unlawful. Initial thoughts?
Well, the judgment, we have been waiting for it for quite some time. The judge has postponed delivering this judgment, I'm sure, more than 8 times. We had thought initially when the matter had gone to court that it would be treated with some level of urgency. So we were already quite disappointed in the manner and the clumsy manner, quite frankly, it had been handled in terms of us getting to a judgment. Nonetheless, we've received the judgment now on Tuesday. Our initial thoughts were quite concerning because having read the judgment against what would have been the transcript of arguments in court and some of the arguments presented, there was really quite some disparities in terms of what was contained in the judgment and what was articulated in court. But from what we then read in the judgment, having studied it and the city having taken the decision to appeal the judgment, was that there's a couple of errors that we feel the court has made, and the city has then taken the decision that we must file a notice of leave to appeal so that we can test if a higher court may not come to a different determination with regards to this particular matter.
Can we talk about what some of those contentious points are that you have with the judgment?
Well, firstly, let me just explain that the judgment limited itself very much to the processes that relate to the appointment. And those processes are not even processes that relate to the recruitment or selection or the suitability or the qualifications of the candidate, but it's a process that relates to the agency of the matter and how it was presented before council. So what this means is that ordinarily the programming committee of council needs to approve all matters that are on the agenda. Was introduced by the Speaker as an urgent matter before Council. Now the judgment has come to a conclusion that the Speaker did not satisfy the requirements of urgency in how she presented the report to Council in line with the rules of Council. And the contention and the argument of the city is that the Speaker did comply and that she did have the right to present the matter as an urgent matter before Council, more so that it was not only introduced as an urgent matter by any ordinary councillor but by the Speaker itself, and that a different court in this instance may come to a different conclusion. Obviously, there's a second matter that relates to Section 54A of the Municipal Structures Act that the judge makes a finding on. But in his own judgment, then argues that he would limit himself to the processes that relate to the appointment. And Section 54A deals with what are the requirements of the position as opposed to the processes. So there's a number of areas, and I would not want to bore you with them, but there's over 10 areas of concern in the judgment, and we are quite convinced that indeed a different court would come to a different determination.
I don't think anyone would find them boring. I think they're important, but what you're making an interesting point though is that really now we're getting into the bits and bobs of what you're challenging in the judgment, and that could be a lengthy discussion. For the most part though, anyone who's watching, certainly if you are a resident of Johannesburg, you're looking at the leadership squabbles within the city of Johannesburg with great concern, right? So let's start here. What happens to that post in the meantime?
Well, the legal principle that exists in our country is that once you file a notice of leave to appeal, automatically the judgment is stayed. So all orders that are contained in that judgment currently will be stayed until that notice of leave to appeal has been heard and the judge has adjudicated on it. So Mr. Brink remains in his position as the city manager. He continues to execute his responsibilities and mandate with regards to servicing the residents of Johannesburg, which is primarily the major concern of the city. You must remember, outside of all these political squabbles, you've got 6 million residents of the city of Johannesburg who must be serviced. And one of the critical issues that the mayor has held as a view is that having come into office at the beginning of this year and finding an administration which had no city manager, no CFO, no COO, the 3 critical most senior positions in a city, meant that you were coming into a city that had administratively collapsed under the DA multi-party government. So what the efforts have been is to make sure that you fill those critical vacancies so that you can be able to put proper processes of accountability and good governance in place. And unfortunately, this political case that has been lodged by the DA is another attempt at collapsing the administrative capacity of the city. And what that does, it compromises the ability of the city to deliver services to the most important people, and that is the 6 million residents of the city.
Well, the stability that you're giving us in saying that Mr. Floyd Brink remains, you having gone or pursuing the route of appealing the ruling of the Gauteng High Court. So that one could argue that is temporary stability, that in a coalition government, this is a challenge that we may well keep facing, where we're seeing the removal of a mayor, a city manager as well. I mean, at what processes then can be put in place to protect those positions for the sake of service delivery and stability?
I think what is very important, and I think it's something that political parties must mature to, is that the administrative stability of the city must be sacrosanct. We must make sure that we've got capable, qualified, and experienced persons who occupy the roles that are necessary to deliver to the residents of the city. Now, the argument that the mayor has strongly made is that we must always insulate the administration from the political squabbles that occur within the city. Whoever may be the mayor, a refuse must be collected on a weekly basis throughout the city. Potholes must be fixed, our roads must be fixed, our public spaces must be cleaned. We must continue to supply electricity and service our residents, irregardless of who is the mayor or who is the speaker within the political realm of council processes. So it is very much critical and primary to us that the stability of the administration in the city is protected. And this particular appeal is exactly in that interest, to make sure that we are able to stabilize the city, we are able to ensure that the authority that vests within the city manager and his executive is sanctified from the entire political squabbles that are attempted in this regard.
Can we look at the timeframes that are happening concurrently here? The court, of course, giving you 10 days to appoint a city manager. That's a very short time frame there for what we call Africa's biggest metro. It's an important position, right? And then you're going this process of this appeal. How do those two timeframes then work concurrently?
Well, the 10 days in this case does no longer apply because, as I have said, once you appeal, all the orders of the court and the judgment are stayed. So that 10 days would only become effective if this particular leave of appeal is denied by the court, which we truly doubt it will be. So the issue of 10 days at this case, in this instance does not arise because that there's an appeal and that order is stayed. And
for the sake of the 6 million residents of Johannesburg that you've talked about, the city manager's priorities right now, because one could easily think that, well, he might very well be distracted at the moment at a time when service delivery issues are quite apparent in Johannesburg.
In fact, as we speak, he's busy with the MMC of Public Safety. They are launching tactical units in the city, which is a new crime-busting unit, which will be focusing on gang-related crimes, hijackings, extortions, and all other kinds of serious crimes within the city. This is a groundbreaking initiative that seeks to ensure that the residents of Johannesburg are safer, and that's the stability we want to see.
All right. Well, we do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming into studio and having this really important discussion with us. That, of course, Mr. Mlimandlela Ndamase, spokesperson for the Johannesburg mayor.